An elderly mother visited her rich daughter, but when she opened the door, she saw something that left her devastated. Helena's heart pounded as she stepped onto the street where her daughter, Isabel, now lived. Nearly a decade had passed since Isabel had left their modest home to chase her dreams. Her dreams had come true, far beyond either of their imaginations. Before I continue, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next fantastic stories. Isabel had become wealthy, her name whispered in business circles and her image gracing magazines. But with her success came silence. Helena's phone calls went unanswered, and her letters remained ignored. As she clutched her worn bag, Helena felt a mix of hope and fear. She had traveled hours to come here, yearning to bridge the distance that wealth and time had forged between them. The weight of loneliness had grown heavy on Helena's shoulders over the years. Alone in her tiny house, she kept relics of Isabel's childhood close to her heart. Tucked into a small, wooden box were memories of a time when her daughter's laughter filled their small kitchen. She had preserved every piece: a faded photograph of Isabel as a child, a worn bracelet they had made together, a birthday card with Isabel's crooked handwriting. These items, though simple, had become Helena's treasures, reminders of the bond that once united them. The decision to visit had not come easily. It took years of hesitation, countless sleepless nights, and moments of intense longing for her daughter's presence. But loneliness had finally overpowered her hesitation. Helena convinced herself that if Isabel saw her, face to face, something in her heart would remember. No amount of success or distance could erase the love between a mother and her child. And so, Helena boarded the bus with nothing more than a small suitcase and the hope that Isabel would open her heart to her once more. As the bus rumbled toward the city, Helena's thoughts drifted to Isabel's childhood. She remembered the early mornings when they would sit by the kitchen table, sharing simple breakfasts before Helena left for work. Isabel had been a bright, curious child, full of questions and dreams, and Helena had poured all her love into raising her. Even though their life was modest, Helena had always been there for her daughter, supporting her with every ounce of strength she had. She had believed, in those days, that nothing could tear them apart. With every mile, Helena's hope grew, but so did her fear. What if Isabel had changed so much that she no longer wanted a mother in her life? Helena tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, dark and heavy. She pictured Isabel's face, the way it had softened in childhood moments of joy, and wondered if there was any trace left of that girl in the woman she had become. The thought filled her with both excitement and dread. It was a journey into the unknown, one she wasn't sure would end in reunion or heartbreak. The bus finally arrived in the heart of the city, and Helena stepped off, clutching her bag tightly. The air was filled with the sounds of traffic, distant voices, and a kind of energy she had never known in her small town. People brushed past her, each one focused on their destination, and Helena felt a pang of isolation. For a moment, she considered turning back, letting go of the dream she had held for so long. But the image of Isabel, her only daughter, kept her moving forward. She could not return without trying to rekindle their bond. As Helena made her way through unfamiliar streets, her mind raced with memories. She thought of Isabel's laughter, the way she used to run into her arms at the end of each day, filling their small home with warmth. Helena remembered the nights when Isabel, still a young girl, would fall asleep in her lap as they watched old movies together. Those memories had been Helena's solace, the reminders of a love she thought was unbreakable. She wondered if Isabel remembered any of those moments or if they had faded away in the glittering lights of her new life. The closer Helena got to Isabel's neighborhood, the more alien it felt. Luxury stores lined the streets, filled with clothes, jewelry, and items she couldn't imagine buying. She passed elegant people who moved with purpose and confidence, their lives seeming so far removed from her own. Helena felt her steps grow slower as the gap between her world and Isabel's became starkly visible. She was just a simple woman, someone who had dedicated her life to giving her daughter a chance at a better life. But now, she wondered if that choice had cost her more than she'd realized. Finally, she reached the street where Isabel's home stood. Her heart raced as she gazed up at the grand mansion, its high walls and tall gates symbolizing the life Isabel now led. Helena felt a pang of sorrow. She had always imagined being part of her daughter's success, standing proudly by her side as she achieved her dreams. Instead, she was just a visitor, a stranger peering into a life that should have felt familiar. But Helena pushed down the sadness, forcing herself to focus on the reason she had come. She had not journeyed all this way to be defeated by walls and gates. Helena took a deep breath and stepped forward, gripping the cold metal of the gate. She pressed the intercom button, her hand trembling slightly, and waited. There was a long silence, and she thought perhaps no one would answer. Just as she was about to lose hope, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Hello? Who is it?" It was a woman's voice, polite, distant, and unfamiliar. Helena's heart sank, realizing that Isabel might not even be home. But she gathered her courage, leaning close to the speaker. I'm here to see Isabel," she said, her voice shaky. "Tell her it's her mother." The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Helena stood by the gate, her heart thudding as she waited for a response. The silence on the other end of the intercom felt crushing, like the weight of all the years they had been apart. She could hear faint sounds from the other side, voices, laughter, footsteps, but no one replied. Her mind raced with questions. Did Isabel know she was here? Would she even care? This wasn't how she had imagined their reunion. Helena had pictured Isabel running to the gate, her face lighting up at the sight of her mother. But here she was, waiting, her hope beginning to feel like a foolish dream. Moments later, a voice returned through the speaker, but it wasn't Isabel's. "Ms. Isabel isn't available at the moment," the woman said, her tone polite but dismissive. "Perhaps you can leave a message, and we'll let her know." Helena's heart sank at the formality, the coldness of being turned away by someone who had no idea who she was. She took a deep breath, clinging to what little courage remained. Please tell her it's her mother," Helena insisted, her voice trembling. "I've come a long way to see her. I just want to talk. Just for a moment." There was a pause, as if the woman on the other end was considering her request. Helena could feel herself holding her breath, her heart pleading silently for just a chance to see Isabel's face, to look into her daughter's eyes and find some trace of the love they once shared. Finally, the voice returned, sounding slightly softer. "Please wait. I'll see if she's available." The line went silent again, but this time Helena felt a faint flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Isabel would agree to see her. As she waited, Helena's thoughts drifted back to the days when Isabel was just a child, full of dreams and boundless energy. She remembered the evenings they spent together, laughing over simple meals, talking about the future. Isabel had always dreamed big, talking about a life far from their small town, where she would have everything she'd ever wanted. Helena had always supported those dreams, working extra hours, sacrificing her own comforts to make sure Isabel had every opportunity. But she had never imagined that those dreams would one day take her daughter so far from her heart. Minutes passed, and Helena's hands grew cold as she gripped the gate, her anticipation fading into a quiet despair. She began to wonder if Isabel would even recognize her, if the woman her daughter had become would remember the sacrifices, the long nights, the laughter and love that had once defined their lives. Isabel had been her whole world, the one constant in Helena's life. Now, standing in front of this grand mansion, she felt like an outsider, a stranger peering into a life she could no longer recognize. Finally, footsteps approached, and Helena's heart leaped with a mix of excitement and fear. She stood up straighter, smoothing her hair, hoping she looked presentable enough for her daughter. But instead of Isabel, a young woman in a crisp uniform appeared, opening the gate just enough to step outside. She gave Helena a polite but reserved smile, one that seemed rehearsed, as if she had practiced greeting unexpected guests. "Ms. Isabel can see you," the woman said, her tone professional. "Please, follow me." Helena's heart fluttered as she stepped through the gate, her mind spinning with emotions she could barely name. She tried to calm herself, to focus on the joy of finally seeing her daughter again. But as she followed the woman down the long, stone pathway toward the grand entrance, an uneasy feeling crept over her. The house was beautiful, elegant, every detail carefully curated. Yet it felt cold, impersonal, a world away from the warmth and simplicity she had once shared with Isabel. She wondered if this life had changed her daughter, turned her into someone else entirely. The woman led her through a set of towering doors and into a lavish foyer. Helena felt small beneath the high ceilings, the chandeliers casting a cool glow over the marble floors. She noticed the expensive artwork on the walls, the fresh flowers arranged in grand vases, each detail a reminder of the life Isabel had created for herself. Yet for all its beauty, the place felt empty, as if it lacked the soul and warmth that had once defined their modest home. Helena swallowed hard, the sharp contrast between this world and her own filling her with doubt. The woman led Helena to a small, elegant sitting room and gestured for her to wait. "Ms. Isabel will be with you shortly," she said before disappearing down a hallway. Alone in the lavish room, Helena felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She smoothed her dress, her hands trembling slightly as she looked around. Everything here was perfect, pristine, untouched. She felt like an intruder, a stranger in her own daughter's life, and she wondered if Isabel felt the same way about her. Minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last, as Helena waited in silence. Her heart ached with 1,000 unspoken words, questions she had rehearsed but now felt foolish to ask. She feared the moment when Isabel would walk through the door, feared the look on her daughter's face, feared that the love they once shared had been lost in the shadows of time and distance. For a fleeting moment, she considered leaving, sparing herself the pain of what might come. But she couldn't. She had come too far, waited too long, and her heart needed answers. Just as she was gathering her courage, Helena heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She held her breath, clutching the sides of her chair, her gaze fixed on the doorway. Her heart raced, filled with hope and dread, as she waited for the familiar face of her daughter to appear. But as the figure stepped into the room, Helena felt a chill run down her spine. Standing before her was Isabel, but she looked like a stranger, her face devoid of the warmth Helena remembered. The years had changed her, hardened her, and for the first time, Helena wondered if she truly recognized the person her daughter had become. Helena sat frozen, her breath caught in her chest as she took in the sight of Isabel standing before her. This was the daughter she had loved fiercely, the little girl she had raised on laughter and late-night stories, the young woman she had encouraged to follow her dreams. Yet, as Helena looked into Isabel's eyes, she saw no spark of recognition, no flicker of the warmth that had once been between them. Isabel's expression was blank, her gaze distant, as if she was staring at a stranger rather than her own mother. Isabel looked poised and polished, dressed in an elegant suit that fit her perfectly, her hair styled with meticulous care. She radiated an aura of control, of someone accustomed to power and wealth. Yet her beauty seemed cold, like a marble statue. Helena felt a pang in her heart as she searched Isabel's face for some hint of her little girl, something to bridge the years that had stretched between them. But her daughter's eyes remained flat, devoid of any memory of the love they had shared. "Isabel," Helena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out instinctively, her hand trembling, but Isabel's gaze flicked down to her hand with a look of discomfort. Helena quickly withdrew it, her face flushing with shame. She had imagined this moment so many times, but never like this. In her dreams, Isabel had run to her, embracing her with tears of joy, not standing there like a stranger, not looking at her with such unfamiliarity. The reality of it left a hollow ache in her chest, a sorrow that words could never capture. Isabel finally spoke, her voice cool and controlled. "Mother," she said, nodding slightly, as if acknowledging a distant acquaintance rather than a mother who had raised her. "This is unexpected." Her tone was polite, almost detached, as if she was speaking to a client or an associate, not the woman who had given her life. Helena felt the sting of Isabel's words, each one a reminder of how far they had drifted apart. She searched for the right words, but found herself at a loss, overwhelmed by the distance that now lay between them. I had to see you," Helena managed, her voice trembling. She tried to hold Isabel's gaze, hoping to reach whatever part of her daughter might still remember. "It's been so long, Isabel. I wanted to know how you were. I've missed you." The words felt small, almost inadequate, against the vastness of what she wanted to say. She wanted to tell Isabel about the loneliness, the endless days and nights spent waiting for a call that never came. But standing here, in this grand, unfamiliar room, those words felt as fragile as glass. Isabel's eyes softened, but only for a moment. She sighed, glancing around the room as if to avoid Helena's gaze. "I've been busy," she replied, her tone still guarded. "There's so much I've been managing, so many responsibilities." Her voice trailed off, as though even she found her excuse insufficient. Helena nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Isabel's words. She understood that life had swept her daughter into a world far removed from their own, a world that had no place for a mother with calloused hands and a heart full of memories. Helena felt a swell of desperation rise within her. She couldn't let this moment pass without at least trying to reach Isabel, to remind her of everything they had once shared. "Isabel," she said softly, leaning forward, her voice thick with the emotion she could no longer contain. Do you remember our home? The small house on Maple Street, the garden we used to tend together?" She smiled, her mind racing through the memories, hoping they might spark something in Isabel's heart. "You used to bring me flowers, those little daisies from the yard?" But Isabel's expression remained unchanged. She glanced at Helena with a faint, almost puzzled look, as though trying to remember something from a long-forgotten dream. "Mother," she began, her voice calm but dismissive, "that was a long time ago. I've moved on from all of that. My life is different now." There was a finality in her tone that cut through Helena's heart, a reminder that whatever bond they once shared had faded into the past. Helena felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away, determined not to let Isabel see her pain. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I know things have changed, Isabel," she said quietly, "but some things shouldn't be forgotten." Her voice grew softer, more vulnerable. "I've missed you. All I've wanted, all these years, is to know you're happy. To know that you haven't forgotten where you came from. That you haven't forgotten." Isabel shifted uncomfortably, glancing down as though unable to meet her mother's eyes. She cleared her throat, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate your concern," she replied, her tone formal, as if rehearsed. "But as you can see, I'm doing well. There's really nothing to worry about." She hesitated, glancing at the door as though eager to end this uncomfortable conversation. "Perhaps it's best if we leave the past in the past." Each word landed with a painful finality, filling Helena with a grief she couldn't begin to express. In that moment, Helena realized that the daughter she had loved, the little girl who had once filled her life with laughter and love, was gone. She had been replaced by a stranger, a polished, distant woman who seemed to have no need for a mother. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, heavy and unyielding, as if the years of distance and silence had finally solidified into an impenetrable wall. And as she sat there, facing the daughter who no longer knew her, Helena's heart broke in a way she had never thought possible. Helena sat frozen, trying to mask the devastation growing within her as Isabel's words echoed painfully in her mind. She had hoped for warmth, even a glimmer of the daughter she remembered, but all she had found was a stranger with Isabel's face. Her heart felt heavy, and each beat seemed to pull her deeper into the reality she had tried to deny. The Isabel she had loved, the girl she had nurtured through years of hardship and sacrifice, was now a woman who looked at her with polite indifference. The realization hit Helena with the force of a wave, leaving her breathless. The room felt colder, the grandeur around her only magnifying her sense of isolation. Every detail, the high ceilings, the chandeliers, the perfect furnishings, seemed to mock the simplicity of the life she had lived. Her mind flooded with memories of their small home, the modest kitchen where she'd cooked countless meals for Isabel, the tiny garden where they had planted flowers together. Each of those memories felt more precious than anything in this luxurious room. She longed to remind Isabel of those moments, to help her see that the bond they shared was worth more than any wealth. "Isabel," she murmured, her voice barely audible, "do you really think you can just forget where you came from?" She tried to keep her tone gentle, hoping to reach the part of Isabel's heart that might still remember. "You may have moved on, but I haven't. I can't. I've spent every day missing you, wondering if you were safe, hoping you'd come back to me. Just one phone call would have been enough." Her voice broke, and she struggled to maintain her composure, her heart bleeding with every word. Isabel's face remained impassive, her gaze steady but void of warmth. "Mother, my life is different now," she said, her tone almost apologetic but distant. "I can't pretend to be the person I was before. I've worked hard to build a life here, and I have responsibilities that you may not understand. I don't have time to dwell on the past." She spoke each word carefully, as if trying to justify her distance, but to Helena, they sounded hollow, as if her daughter was pushing her further away with every sentence. Helena's heart clenched, the ache deepening as she realized Isabel truly believed her own words. She couldn't comprehend how Isabel could speak so coldly, as though their years together meant nothing. "I'm not asking for much," Helena replied, her voice trembling. "Just a little of your time, a moment to remember what we once were. To remember that I was there, Isabel, that I loved you more than anything in this world." Her words poured out, raw and unguarded, driven by a desperation she could no longer contain. She felt her own vulnerability, exposed and laid bare. Isabel sighed, glancing at her watch, her expression growing more impatient. "Mother, I appreciate your visit, but I really do have things I need to get back to," she said, her voice cool and distant. "I didn't expect you to show up unannounced like this." Her words stung, a painful reminder that her presence was now a mere inconvenience to her own daughter. Helena felt her heart shatter a little more, her spirit slowly breaking under the weight of Isabel's rejection. The daughter she had once known would never have turned her away like this. Helena looked down, a wave of shame and regret washing over her. She felt out of place, an intruder in the life of the person she had sacrificed so much for. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of her worn purse, the only thing that felt familiar in this cold, sterile room. She realized, painfully, that she no longer belonged in Isabel's world. She had raised her daughter to succeed, to pursue her dreams, but she had never imagined that success would mean cutting ties with the past, or with her mother. Swallowing her pride, Helena forced a small smile, trying to hide the grief that now weighed down her soul. "I understand, Isabel," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. I suppose I should let you get back to your life." She stood slowly, her movements stiff with the heaviness of defeat. She wanted to hold her daughter close, to tell her that she would always be there, waiting, but she knew the gesture would be unwelcome. Isabel's cold, unreadable gaze confirmed as much. Just as Helena turned to leave, she paused, glancing back one last time. She searched Isabel's face, desperate to find even a trace of the girl she once knew, the girl who had once loved her fiercely. But all she saw was a stranger. The realization hit her with a devastating finality, and she felt her heart splinter. "Goodbye, Isabel," she whispered, her voice choked with sorrow. "Oh, I'll always love you." She let the words hang in the air, hoping they would reach some hidden part of her daughter's heart. But Isabel simply nodded, unmoved. As Helena walked through the lavish halls and back to the front door, her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. The grandeur around her, once so intimidating, now felt hollow, a cruel mockery of the warmth she had once shared with Isabel. She barely noticed the housekeeper who opened the door for her, or the curious glances of the staff as she passed. All she could feel was the sharp, unrelenting pain of loss, a grief that went deeper than she had ever imagined possible. Stepping outside, Helena felt the cold air hit her face, grounding her in a reality she could hardly bear. She had come here hoping for a reunion, for the embrace of a daughter she had missed every single day. Instead, she was leaving with a heart more broken than when she arrived, her soul aching with a pain that words could not capture. Helena walked down the long path away from Isabel's mansion, her shoulders hunched, each step feeling heavier than the last. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, yet her mind was a whirlwind of sorrow and unanswered questions. She had traveled so far, clinging to hope, only to leave with a heart burdened by grief. As she reached the gate, she paused, glancing back at the grand house one last time. The mansion loomed in the distance, indifferent, as if mocking her with its cold elegance. It was a stark reminder that her daughter's world no longer had a place for her. As she stood there, memories of Isabel as a little girl flooded her mind. She could see her daughter's bright, innocent smile, the way she would run into her arms, laughing and calling her mama. Those were simpler times, filled with love and laughter, and for a brief moment, Helena allowed herself to linger in those memories, holding on to the remnants of happiness that once filled their lives. She remembered the promises they had made to each other, the assurances that no matter what happened, they would always be there for one another. But now, those promises felt like distant echoes, lost in the shadow of the life Isabel had built for herself. Helena finally turned away, her steps slow and heavy as she walked through the gate and onto the street. She felt like a stranger in this part of the city, her simple clothing and worn bag out of place among the designer stores and polished cars. The world around her felt alien, filled with people who walked past without a second glance, their lives filled with a kind of ease she had never known. She tried to steel herself, to push down the ache in her chest, but each step felt like an admission of defeat, a surrender to the reality she had tried so hard to deny. The ride home was quiet, the bus half empty, leaving Helena alone with her thoughts. She stared out the window, watching as the city gave way to familiar landscapes, the tall buildings replaced by open fields and modest houses. Her heart felt hollow, her mind replaying the encounter with Isabel over and over, each detail a painful reminder of how far apart they had grown. She couldn't understand how the daughter she had loved so deeply had become so distant, so unrecognizable. A single question haunted her: had she failed Isabel in some way, or had the world simply changed her beyond recognition? As the bus rolled through Helena's small town, she felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The familiar sights should have comforted her, but instead, they reminded her of the life she had left behind, the life she had sacrificed so much to give Isabel the future she had wanted. She had raised her daughter with love and care, always putting Isabel's needs before her own. Yet, in the end, it seemed that nothing she had done was enough to keep Isabel close. Helena felt a bitterness she wasn't accustomed to, a lingering question of whether her sacrifices had been in vain. When she finally reached her home, Helena unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet, familiar space. The small living room was exactly as she had left it, simple, warm, filled with mementos of a life built on love and resilience. She sank into her worn armchair, feeling the weight of the day press down on her, her exhaustion both physical and emotional. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the photos on the wall, each one a memory of happier times, of laughter and closeness that now felt like a distant dream. Helena reached for a photo of Isabel as a young girl, smiling brightly on her first day of school, clutching her mother's hand. Tears filled her eyes as she traced her fingers over the glass, remembering how proud she had been that day, filled with hope for Isabel's future. She had always believed that Isabel's happiness was worth any sacrifice, that their bond would be strong enough to withstand anything. But now, that belief felt fragile, as if it had been shattered by the cold reality of their reunion. The emptiness in Isabel's eyes haunted her, filling her with a sorrow that seemed impossible to escape. As the evening wore on, Helena lit a single candle on the kitchen table, a small ritual she often did to feel close to those she had lost. She sat in silence, her heart heavy, her mind swirling with memories. The house felt achingly quiet, the silence amplifying her loneliness. She thought of calling a friend, perhaps sharing her sorrow, but the words felt too painful, too personal to express. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting the tears fall, each one a release of the grief she had carried since she left Isabel's mansion. Days passed, but the sadness lingered like a shadow, following Helena wherever she went. She went through her routines, visited the local market, exchanged polite greetings with neighbors, yet a part of her felt numb, as if she were moving through life in a haze. She avoided looking at Isabel's photos, unable to face the reminders of what they had lost. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, haunted by questions that had no answers, by memories of a love that now felt one-sided. One evening, as she was tidying up, a small envelope slipped from her bag, falling onto the floor. Helena stared at it, confused, as she didn't remember bringing any letters. She picked it up, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a single note, written in a hurried, almost frantic scrawl. Her heart raced as she recognized Isabel's handwriting. The words were simple, but they struck Helena like a lightning bolt. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say it. Please, come back." Helena's heart skipped a beat as she read the words, her mind struggling to process what they meant. Could it be that Isabel had felt something during their meeting, something she had been too proud or too fearful to express? The note was unsigned, but Helena knew, without a doubt, that it was from her daughter. A glimmer of hope reignited within her, tentative but real, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she and Isabel might find their way back to each other. Helena's hands trembled as she clutched the note, the words blurring slightly as tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say it. Please, come back." Those simple words, written in her daughter's familiar handwriting, carried a weight that shook Helena's heart. She read the note over and over, each time feeling the faint hope within her grow stronger. The walls she had felt between them, Isabel's coldness and distance, had not been the full truth. Beneath her daughter's polished surface, there was a lingering connection, something Helena had nearly given up on. She sat down, clutching the note to her chest, her mind racing with emotions she could hardly name. It had been years since Isabel had reached out in any real way, and here was a message, however brief, that seemed to bridge the impossible distance between them. Helena could feel the stirring of a maternal instinct, the fierce love that had driven her through the hardest years of her life. She knew this might be her only chance to truly reconnect with Isabel, to find out if there was still a part of her daughter that remembered who they had once been. As she sat there, her mind began to replay every moment of their painful reunion. She remembered the coldness in Isabel's eyes, the indifferent words, the way her daughter had looked at her like a stranger. But now, this note gave those moments a new meaning. Perhaps Isabel's heart hadn't been as closed off as she had appeared. Perhaps there was pain behind her daughter's detached demeanor, a pain she hadn't known how to express. Helena felt a surge of determination. If there was even the slightest chance to reconnect, she would take it. The next morning, Helena rose early, her heart both hopeful and anxious. She prepared herself for the journey back to Isabel's house, choosing her clothes carefully, brushing her hair with steady hands. This time, she wasn't filled with dread or fear. Instead, she felt a quiet confidence, a mother's resolve to reach her child no matter the distance. She looked around her small, modest home one last time, drawing strength from the warmth and love that filled every corner. It was the love that had built Isabel's foundation, and Helena hoped it would be enough to bridge the years that had separated them. On the bus ride, Helena stared out the window, watching the familiar countryside roll by. Her mind was a mixture of memories and dreams, of Isabel as a little girl, full of laughter and life, and of what their relationship could still become. She knew this wasn't just about seeing Isabel again, it was about giving them both a chance to heal, to mend the wounds they had carried in silence. She clutched the note tightly, as if it were a lifeline, a tangible proof that there was still something left between them. When she arrived at Isabel's mansion, Helena's heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The house seemed even grander in the daylight, its beauty imposing yet distant. But this time, Helena didn't feel intimidated. She approached the gate with purpose, pressing the intercom button and waiting patiently. There was a long pause, and her heart raced as she waited, wondering if Isabel would truly let her in. After what felt like an eternity, the gate slowly creaked open, and Helena stepped forward, clutching her bag as she made her way up the path. At the entrance, a housekeeper greeted her, nodding politely as she led her to the same sitting room where she had waited before. The room felt colder this time, but Helena didn't let it unsettle her. She held Isabel's note tightly, using it as a reminder of why she was here, of the hope that had brought her back. She sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, listening to the sounds of the house around her, each one magnified in the silence. Minutes passed, but Helena's resolve remained steady, her heart open and ready to receive whatever her daughter was willing to give. After a while, footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder as they approached. Helena looked up, her heart pounding as Isabel appeared in the doorway. This time, her daughter's face held a different expression, a softness, a vulnerability that Helena hadn't seen in years. Isabel's gaze lingered on her mother, and for the first time, Helena saw a flicker of the little girl she had once known. She felt her throat tighten, her emotions rushing to the surface as Isabel stepped into the room, her movements slower, more hesitant. "Mother," Isabel's voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as if she were unsure of how to begin. She looked down, her hands twisting nervously, her polished exterior slipping away to reveal a glimpse of the person Helena had known so well. I'm sorry for how I acted last time." Isabel's voice trembled slightly, her eyes misty. "I didn't know how to handle it. Seeing you, it brought up things I thought I'd buried." Her words were raw, stripped of the cool detachment she had worn before. Helena felt her heart break and mend at the same time, hearing the pain and regret in Isabel's voice. Helena reached out, her hand covering Isabel's, offering her daughter the comfort she had been waiting years to give. "Isabel, it's okay," she whispered, her voice filled with a tenderness that had never faded. "I'm just grateful to be here with you, to have a chance to talk." Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Isabel, her heart aching with love and understanding. She could feel the walls between them crumbling, years of distance melting away in the warmth of their shared sorrow. Isabel took a deep breath, her gaze meeting Helena's with an intensity that spoke volumes. "Mother, there's so much I need to tell you, things I've kept hidden." Her voice cracked, and she closed her eyes, struggling to hold back tears. I got so caught up in this world, in becoming someone I thought I needed to be. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself, and I lost you." Her words hung heavy in the air, filled with the weight of years of separation. Helena squeezed Isabel's hand, her heart bursting with forgiveness, with love for the daughter she had never truly lost. They sat in silence for a moment, holding each other's hands, their hearts raw and open. Helena felt a sense of peace, a quiet joy that she hadn't known in years. This was the reunion she had prayed for, a moment of healing that seemed almost miraculous. And as they sat there, sharing their grief and their love, Helena knew that this was only the beginning. They still had wounds to heal, memories to revisit, but for the first time, they were truly together, mother and daughter, bound by a love that had withstood the test of time. Helena and Isabel sat in that quiet, sunlit room, each allowing the silence to wash over them as they held each other's hands. For so long, they had been separated not just by distance but by invisible walls, and now those walls seemed to dissolve. Helena sensed the heaviness in Isabel's heart, a burden her daughter had carried alone. She felt a pang of sorrow, realizing that Isabel's silence all these years had likely been a way to cope with struggles Helena had never known about. But now, she was here, ready to listen to whatever her daughter needed to share. Isabel took a shaky breath, as though gathering strength, and finally spoke. "Mother," she began, her voice soft and unsteady, "there are things I need to tell you. Things I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid." Her gaze was downcast, and Helena could see the pain etched on her daughter's face. She gently squeezed Isabel's hand, silently offering the support she had longed to give. She wanted to tell Isabel that whatever the past held, she was here, unconditionally, ready to help her daughter carry it. Isabel paused, her fingers nervously twisting a bracelet on her wrist. "When I first started building my career, I was so focused on success, on proving myself. It felt like I had to become someone different, someone untouchable." Her voice grew more fragile with each word, as if admitting this was peeling away a layer of armor she'd worn for too long. "I pushed everyone away. I thought that was the only way to survive, to thrive in this world. But then, I looked up one day, and I was alone, and I realized that I had lost something precious." Helena listened, her heart aching as Isabel's words revealed the loneliness her daughter had endured. She could see it now, the cost of the life Isabel had chosen. Behind the wealth, the success, there was a soul yearning for connection, a part of Isabel that had been hidden even from herself. Helena stroked Isabel's hand, her touch tender and reassuring. "Isabel, I never stopped loving you," she said, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. "I was always here, waiting for you. You never had to be alone." Tears welled up in Isabel's eyes, and she struggled to speak, her voice breaking with emotion. "I know that now, Mother. I think I knew it deep down, even when I tried to ignore it. I was just too afraid to reach out, too ashamed of what I'd become." Her words hung heavy in the air, filled with the regret of years lost, of moments left unshared. Helena felt the sting of those words but pushed her own pain aside, knowing her daughter needed her understanding, not her grief. She nodded, her gaze filled with compassion. Isabel let out a shaky sigh, her shoulders finally relaxing, as if letting go of a weight she had carried for years. "I'm sorry, Mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry for leaving you behind, for forgetting the things that truly mattered. I thought I was doing what was right for me, but in the end, I lost myself. I lost you." A single tear slipped down her cheek, and Helena reached out, wiping it away with the tenderness only a mother could give. She leaned in, embracing her daughter, holding her close in a way she hadn't done since Isabel was a child. "It's okay, my love," Helena murmured, her own tears falling freely now. "We all make mistakes, but it's never too late to come home. I've waited for this moment for so long, and now that you're here, that's all that matters." Her words seemed to soothe Isabel, who rested her head on her mother's shoulder, allowing herself to be vulnerable, to be the daughter she had hidden away. They sat there, in a shared moment of healing, neither needing to say more. The silence between them spoke louder than words, bridging the years they had lost. As they pulled back, Isabel gave a small, hesitant smile, her gaze full of gratitude and relief. "I want to make things right, Mother," she said, determination shining through her vulnerability. "I don't know how to undo the past, but I want you in my life. I want us to be close again. If you're willing, I'd like to spend more time together. I want you to know who I am now, and I want to know you all over again." Helena's heart swelled with joy, a feeling she hadn't known in years, as she nodded, her face bright with love and hope. Helena reached for Isabel's hand, holding it tightly. "I would love nothing more," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. "I don't need grand gestures or apologies. I just want to be with you, to know that you're safe, happy, and loved. We'll take it one day at a time, and we'll make new memories together." The promise hung in the air between them, filling the room with a quiet joy, a sense of peace that had eluded them both for so long. Isabel smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reminded Helena of the little girl she used to know. "Then let's start with something simple," Isabel said, her tone lighter. "Would you like to stay for dinner? I'd like to cook for you, just like you used to do for me." Helena's eyes widened in surprise, and then she laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. She couldn't remember the last time she had heard her own laughter or seen her daughter's genuine smile. It felt like a blessing, a second chance neither of them had thought possible. "Yes, Isabel," Helena replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I would love that." And as they headed toward the kitchen, hand in hand, Helena felt a profound peace settle in her heart. They had begun to rebuild what had once been broken, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. Helena followed Isabel to the kitchen, a room she had barely noticed during her last visit. Now, as she looked around, she was struck by its beauty, a space that was both modern and warm, filled with the rich scent of fresh herbs and spices. It was clear that Isabel had invested in the finest of everything, from the polished marble countertops to the elegant cookware. But what moved Helena more than the luxury was the simple, almost shy way Isabel moved about, as though rediscovering a part of herself that had been buried beneath layers of success and ambition. Isabel opened the refrigerator, pulling out fresh vegetables and ingredients, her movements careful and precise. Helena watched her, feeling a warmth spread through her chest as she took in the sight of her daughter preparing a meal. This simple act, Isabel cooking for her, was something she had dreamed about during the long, lonely years apart. It reminded her of the times they had spent together in their tiny kitchen, laughing, sharing stories, and creating meals from whatever ingredients they could afford. The memories flooded her with a bittersweet joy. As Isabel chopped vegetables, she glanced at Helena with a gentle smile. "I know it's been a long time since I've done this," she said, her voice soft but warm. "I can't promise it'll taste as good as your cooking, but I'll do my best." Helena chuckled, the sound light and full of affection. "Don't worry, my love," she replied, her tone tender. "I'm sure it'll be perfect. Just the fact that you're doing this means more to me than you know." Isabel's face softened at her mother's words, a hint of vulnerability shining through. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, Helena seated at the kitchen island, watching Isabel move around the space with a grace and ease she hadn't expected. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke, the silence between them filled with the sounds of chopping and stirring, the sizzling of vegetables on the stove. But it wasn't an empty silence, it was one of shared understanding, as though they were both reliving memories that didn't need to be spoken. Helena felt the years of distance begin to dissolve, replaced by a quiet peace that seemed to settle deep within her soul. After a while, Isabel turned to her, wiping her hands on a towel, and leaned against the counter with a thoughtful expression. "Mother, I've been thinking about everything you've done for me, all the sacrifices you made," she said, her voice filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "I don't know if I ever truly understood it before. I was so focused on leaving our old life behind, on making a name for myself, that I didn't realize how much of myself I was losing in the process." Her gaze met Helena's, raw and open, and Helena felt her heart swell with love. Helena reached across the counter, placing her hand over Isabel's, her touch gentle and reassuring. "You did what you thought was best, Isabel. I understand that now," she replied, her voice steady. "You needed to find your own way, to build a life you could be proud of. I only ever wanted you to be happy. That's all I ever wanted." Isabel's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she squeezed her mother's hand, a silent promise that she would not let this bond slip away again. They held each other's gaze, a silent forgiveness passing between them. As they sat down to eat, Isabel served the dishes with a shy smile, watching Helena's reaction as she took the first bite. Helena closed her eyes, savoring the flavors, and gave her daughter an approving nod. "This is wonderful, Isabel," she said warmly. "You've really outdone yourself." Isabel beamed, her face lighting up with a joy Helena hadn't seen in years. It was as if, in this small act of cooking for her mother, Isabel was reconnecting not just with Helena but with a part of herself she had nearly forgotten. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the quiet joy of each other's company. They spoke of simple things, memories from the past, stories from Isabel's childhood, and the dreams they had once shared. For the first time in years, there was no tension, no need for explanations or apologies. They were simply a mother and daughter, sharing a meal, and that was enough. Helena felt a sense of wholeness that she had feared would never return, a sense that she and Isabel were finally healing together. As they finished the meal, Isabel looked at Helena with a thoughtful expression. "Mother," she began softly, "there's something I'd like to ask you. I know it might be a lot, but would you consider staying with me for a while? Just until we've had some more time together?" Her voice was hesitant, as though she feared Helena might decline, but her eyes held a quiet hope. The question caught Helena off guard, but her heart filled with warmth at the thought of spending more time with her daughter, of sharing more moments like this one. Helena's face softened, and she reached across the table, taking Isabel's hand in hers. "I would love that, Isabel," she replied, her voice filled with quiet joy. "There's nothing I'd rather do than spend more time with you." A look of relief passed over Isabel's face, and she smiled, her expression full of gratitude. In that moment, Helena felt that all the years of waiting, all the heartache and loneliness, had been worth it. She had her daughter back, not just in words but in spirit, and she knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. As they cleared the table together, Helena felt a profound sense of peace. The kitchen, once cold and unfamiliar, now felt warm and inviting, filled with laughter and the scent of their shared meal. They worked side by side, as if no time had passed at all, and for the first time, Helena felt truly at home. Isabel was no longer the stranger she had once feared she had become. She was her daughter again, and their bond, though tested, was stronger than ever. And as they shared a quiet smile, Helena knew that this time, they would not let go. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm, each one drawing Helena and Isabel closer as they settled into a new, unexpected routine. Each morning, they shared a cup of coffee in the garden, surrounded by the soft sounds of birdsong and the fragrance of freshly bloomed flowers. Helena cherished these mornings. She savored the warmth of the sun on her face, the smell of coffee, and the sound of Isabel's laughter as they spoke about everything and nothing. These were moments she had once thought lost, stolen by years of distance, but now they were a part of her life again, as natural as breathing. One afternoon, while sitting together in the cozy living room, Isabel opened a box she had tucked away in a corner. "I found this while sorting through some things," she said, lifting the lid to reveal photos, letters, and small keepsakes from her childhood. Helena's heart swelled as she recognized each item: a pressed flower from their garden, a drawing Isabel had made in school, and a few letters she had sent after Isabel had first moved away. Each piece was a reminder of a time when their lives had been simpler, yet richer with meaning and connection. As they sifted through the box, Isabel grew quiet, her face softening with a hint of sadness. "I kept these because they reminded me of where I came from," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "Even when I tried to push it all away, I couldn't let go entirely." She paused, looking at Helena, her eyes glistening. "I used to tell myself I was too busy to call, that I had more important things to do, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that the person I'd become wouldn't be good enough for you." Helena took Isabel's hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Oh, Isabel," she said softly, "you've always been enough. I was proud of you from the very beginning, and nothing could ever change that. You're my daughter, and nothing else matters to me." Her words seemed to lift a weight from Isabel's shoulders, and she smiled, her face filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Helena felt a deep satisfaction, a sense that they were finally bridging the emotional chasm that had once separated them. Later that evening, Isabel suggested they take a walk through the neighborhood. As they strolled along the quiet streets, Helena noticed how neighbors greeted Isabel with warmth and respect, their smiles genuine. It became clear to her that, despite Isabel's success, she was well loved and admired, not just for her wealth, but for her kindness. Helena's heart filled with pride as she realized that her daughter, despite the struggles and the time apart, had not lost the compassion that had always been at the core of her character. Isabel's kindness was a gift Helena knew she had helped nurture. As they walked, Isabel opened up more about her life, sharing stories of challenges she had faced and mistakes she had made. She spoke about the loneliness that often accompanied her success, the friends she had lost along the way, and the emptiness that had haunted her in moments of quiet. Helena listened, her heart aching as she realized just how much Isabel had carried alone. "I was so focused on being strong that I didn't let anyone close," Isabel admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to be that way anymore, Mother. I want to live a life that feels real." Helena nodded, understanding completely. She knew the importance of connection, the fulfillment that came from sharing life's burdens and joys with others. "It's never too late to let people in, Isabel," she replied gently. "And I'm here now, as long as you'll have me. You don't have to face anything alone anymore." They walked on in silence, the quiet night air wrapping around them like a blanket, as though the universe itself were bearing witness to their healing. It was as if the years they had spent apart had been preparing them for this moment, for a bond that was stronger and deeper than before. The next morning, Helena found herself waking up to the smell of freshly baked bread. She made her way to the kitchen, where Isabel was carefully arranging breakfast on the table, her face filled with concentration. "Good morning, Mother." Isabel greeted her, her voice warm and cheerful. Helena smiled, her heart swelling at the sight of her daughter's radiant face. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, a quiet joy in knowing that the woman standing before her was not only her daughter but also her friend. As they enjoyed breakfast together, Isabel looked up thoughtfully. "Mother, I've been thinking. I want you to stay with me, not just for a few days, but for as long as you'd like. This house is too big for one person, and it would mean everything to me if we could share it." Helena's breath caught, her heart pounding as she took in her daughter's words. She had always dreamed of being close to Isabel, but she had never imagined this, a true place in Isabel's life, as part of her home. Helena placed her hand over Isabel's, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "I'd love that, Isabel. More than anything." They shared a quiet moment, the promise of a new beginning settling around them like a gentle embrace. Helena knew that their journey was far from over, that there would be more challenges, more conversations to have. But for the first time in years, she felt certain that they would face them together, that they were finally living a truth they had both yearned for. As they cleared the table together, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Helena felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond words, a feeling of belonging that had once seemed impossible. She knew that this was what she had been searching for all along, not just a reunion with her daughter, but a true home, a place where they could be themselves, fully and openly. And as they shared a simple smile, Helena felt that all the heartache, all the years of waiting, had been worth it. The days turned into weeks, and Helena found herself settling comfortably into life with Isabel. Their routines, once so separate, began to intertwine, filling the once silent mansion with laughter, stories, and memories made anew. Every morning, they shared breakfast in the sunlit dining room, talking about everything from daily plans to small, treasured memories of the past. The emptiness that had once filled Helena's heart was replaced by a sense of joy and purpose. She had come searching for her daughter, but in many ways, she had also found herself. One afternoon, as they sat together on the veranda, Isabel looked at her mother with a contemplative expression. "Mother, there's something I'd like us to do together," she began, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. "There's a community center not far from here. They're looking for volunteers to help with their programs, especially for people who need extra support." She paused, searching Helena's face for a reaction. "I thought it might be something we could do together, give back, just as you taught me." Helena's heart warmed at the suggestion. She had always valued kindness and compassion, and it touched her deeply to see those values still alive in Isabel. "I would love that, Isabel," she replied, smiling as she reached for her daughter's hand. "Helping others has always been important to me, and I'm so proud to see that it's important to you too." Isabel's eyes sparkled with gratitude, and in that moment, Helena saw a glimpse of the young girl Isabel had once been, the girl who had picked flowers for her mother and dreamed of making the world a better place. A few days later, they visited the community center together. The center was buzzing with life, filled with people of all ages, children running in the hallways, elderly folks chatting over tea, and volunteers bustling about with purpose. Helena felt an immediate connection to the place, its warmth and vitality reminding her of the community she had once been a part of. She and Isabel quickly signed up to help with various programs, from organizing activities for the elderly to assisting with meals. It was work that felt meaningful, and for the first time in years, Helena felt like she was part of something larger than herself. As the days passed, Helena and Isabel became familiar faces at the center. They found joy in the small acts of service, the simple connections they made with the people they met. Helena loved seeing Isabel's genuine kindness shine through, watching her daughter listen intently to people's stories, offering comfort with a gentle smile or a caring word. Helena realized that beneath all the success and sophistication, Isabel still had a heart full of empathy. She was witnessing the true, beautiful essence of her daughter, the person she had always hoped Isabel would become. One day, after a particularly busy afternoon at the center, an elderly woman approached Helena and Isabel as they were tidying up. "You two make a wonderful team," she remarked with a warm smile. "I don't know if I've ever seen such a strong bond between a mother and daughter." The words brought tears to Helena's eyes, and she glanced at Isabel, who gave her a small, knowing smile. There was a time, not so long ago, when such a statement would have felt like a painful reminder of what they had lost. But now, it felt like a celebration of all they had regained. As they walked home that evening, Helena felt a quiet happiness settle over her. The pain of their years apart was beginning to fade, replaced by the joy of the present, the promise of the future. Isabel linked her arm through Helena's, and they strolled in companionable silence, watching the sky change from pale blue to the deep shades of twilight. "Thank you, Mother," Isabel said softly, breaking the silence. "For being here, for giving me this second chance. I don't know what I would do without you." Her voice trembled with sincerity, her gratitude clear in every word. Helena squeezed Isabel's arm, her heart swelling with love. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," she replied gently. "We've both made mistakes, Isabel, but we're here now, and that's all that matters. We're building something beautiful together, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it." Isabel nodded, her eyes misty with emotion, and they continued their walk, both of them knowing that their bond was stronger than it had ever been. It was a quiet, steady kind of love, one that could weather any storm. As they reached home, Isabel turned to Helena, her face bright with a new idea. "Mother," she said, "how would you feel about hosting a small gathering here? Maybe just a few people from the community center, and some neighbors too. I'd love to fill this house with people, laughter, and joy, like the home we used to have." Helena felt a rush of excitement at the thought. The idea of opening Isabel's grand, often silent home to others, of creating a space of warmth and welcome, filled her with a sense of purpose. "I think that sounds wonderful, Isabel," Helena replied, her smile wide and genuine. "It's been too long since we've had a gathering, and I'd love to help you plan it." They spent the rest of the evening excitedly discussing ideas, jotting down notes and brainstorming menus. Helena felt her heart come alive as she envisioned the event, imagining the sound of laughter filling the halls, the aroma of home-cooked food, and the joy of people coming together. It was a vision of a new beginning, not just for her and Isabel, but for everyone they had come to know and cherish. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Helena felt a profound sense of peace. She had come to Isabel's home as a visitor, a mother seeking a lost connection. But now, she was part of something much greater, a life rebuilt, a love renewed, and a future that held the promise of endless tomorrows. For the first time in years, she felt truly at home, not only in Isabel's house but in her daughter's heart. The day of the gathering arrived, and the mansion buzzed with excitement. Helena and Isabel had spent the morning decorating, filling the home with fresh flowers, arranging tables, and cooking together. Helena moved through the kitchen with ease, rolling out dough for pastries, chopping vegetables, and tasting sauces, while Isabel prepared delicate appetizers and set the table with beautiful dishes. Their laughter filled the house, mingling with the savory aromas. It felt like old times, and Helena's heart swelled with gratitude. This was the life she had missed, a life rich with simple, shared moments. As evening approached, the guests began to arrive, their voices and laughter bringing warmth to the grand space. Neighbors, friends from the community center, and people they had helped over the last few weeks all gathered, each bringing a bit of their own joy and energy. Isabel greeted each person with a genuine smile, her warmth visible as she welcomed them into her home. Helena watched proudly, seeing her daughter shine with a kind of happiness that went beyond appearances. Isabel was no longer the distant, polished woman she had once feared her daughter had become. She was someone deeply connected to the people around her. Helena felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Mrs. Monroe, a woman from the community center who had quickly become a close friend. "Your daughter has such a beautiful heart, Helena," she said warmly, her eyes crinkling with kindness. "It's clear she gets that from you." Helena felt tears prick her eyes at the compliment, her heart swelling with pride. She smiled and thanked Mrs. Monroe, knowing that Isabel's kindness was something she had hoped would survive even during their years apart. As the evening unfolded, Isabel took the time to introduce Helena to each guest, proudly sharing stories about her mother and the life they had shared before. Each story carried warmth, laughter, and a sense of belonging that Helena hadn't felt in years. Isabel recounted tales of their small garden, the simple meals they had shared, and the countless sacrifices her mother had made. Helena felt both embarrassed and deeply moved as Isabel spoke, her daughter's words reminding her of all they had overcome and how far they had come back to each other. At one point in the evening, Isabel raised a glass, quieting the room with a gentle smile. "I just want to say thank you," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "To each of you for being here tonight, and especially to my mother." Her gaze fell on Helena, soft and full of gratitude. "My mother taught me the importance of love, kindness, and resilience. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to her." Her voice cracked slightly, and she took a breath before continuing. "She showed me that true wealth isn't about money, but about the connections we hold dear, the people who stay with us through everything." The room erupted in applause, and Helena felt her heart swell with a mixture of joy and humility. She felt Isabel's love and gratitude wash over her, the years of silence and separation finally healed by her daughter's words. When the applause quieted, Helena stood, her voice shaky with emotion as she spoke. "Thank you, Isabel. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I'm so grateful to be a part of this wonderful community, and even more grateful to be here with my daughter." She raised her glass, her eyes shining. "To family, friends, and the journey that brings us all together." As the night wore on, Helena found herself surrounded by people, each one eager to talk with her, to hear more about her and Isabel's story. She felt both cherished and embraced, her heart full to bursting with a sense of home and belonging. At one point, she slipped away to the garden for a quiet moment, needing a bit of peace to take it all in. The garden was bathed in soft moonlight, the flowers Isabel had chosen adding a touch of elegance to the peaceful space. Isabel soon joined her, wrapping an arm around Helena's shoulders. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the gentle sway of the trees. "Thank you, Mother," Isabel whispered, her voice filled with tenderness. "Thank you for coming back, for giving me the chance to make things right." Helena smiled, pulling her daughter close, resting her head against Isabel's shoulder. "I think we've both found our way back, Isabel. We've built something beautiful together, and I couldn't be prouder of you." They stayed like that, the night air cool around them, their hearts warm with the knowledge that they had finally healed. Helena felt a quiet peace settle over her, a sense that every moment, every heartache, had led them to this place. She realized now that her love for Isabel, the bond that had carried them through years of pain, was stronger than anything life could throw at them. They had found each other again, and that was all that mattered. As they returned inside, Helena noticed how effortlessly Isabel now moved through her home, the once grand mansion now transformed into a place of warmth and belonging. It was no longer a reminder of their separation but a symbol of the love they had rebuilt. Helena's heart felt light, free from the sadness that had once haunted her. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she was truly home. When the last guest had left, and the house had grown quiet again, Helena and Isabel sat together in the cozy glow of the living room, surrounded by the remnants of the evening's joy. They shared a knowing smile, both of them basking in the comfort of each other's presence. Helena reached for Isabel's hand, holding it tightly, feeling the strength of their bond pulsing between them. "I'm proud of you, Isabel," she whispered, her voice soft with love. "And I'm so grateful to be here with you, just as we were always meant to be." In that quiet moment, as mother and daughter sat hand in hand, Helena felt a peace beyond words. She had come full circle, her heart restored, her life complete. As the morning sun crept into the house the next day, Helena woke to a profound sense of contentment. The memories of last night's gathering filled her with warmth, laughter still seemed to linger in the walls, and a new peace had settled over the home. She made her way to the kitchen, intending to start breakfast for Isabel, but found her daughter already there, humming softly as she brewed coffee. Isabel looked up with a smile as Helena entered, her face glowing with a quiet happiness that made Helena's heart swell. "Good morning, Mother," Isabel greeted warmly, sliding a mug of freshly brewed coffee across the counter. Helena accepted it gratefully, taking a sip and savoring the rich flavor. They sat together in comfortable silence, letting the memories of the night before settle around them. There was something about the simple act of sitting together in the morning light, the air filled with a gentle peace, that felt like the culmination of everything Helena had hoped for. They had finally found their way back to each other, not just as mother and daughter, but as friends. After a while, Isabel reached for Helena's hand, her expression serious but full of love. "Mother, I've been thinking," she began, her tone thoughtful. "You've brought so much back into my life, more than I can ever repay. I want us to keep building this, a life together." Her eyes were earnest as she continued, "I want this house to feel like home, not just for me, but for you too. And I've been thinking, maybe we could open it to others, like we did last night. Create a space for the community, for people who need connection, just like we once did." Helena's heart leapt at the idea, feeling a thrill of purpose spark within her. She nodded, the thought resonating deeply. "I think that's a beautiful idea, Isabel. This house, it's meant to be shared, to be filled with laughter and warmth. We found a way to each other again, and maybe we can give others that same chance." They exchanged a smile, both knowing that this decision was more than a gesture, it was a commitment to the love and forgiveness they had fought so hard to find. It was the legacy they would build together. They spent the morning discussing ideas, envisioning the ways they could turn Isabel's mansion into a place of welcome and connection. Helena suggested hosting monthly gatherings, inviting people from all walks of life, especially those in need of community. Isabel loved the idea, and they spoke excitedly about creating a garden space, a cozy reading room, and even setting up programs for local children and elderly guests. They dreamed aloud, each suggestion building on the last, until the house in their minds was more than just a home, it was a haven for anyone seeking kindness and connection. By afternoon, they were already making plans, jotting down lists of items they would need and the people they would invite to help make their vision a reality. Isabel's face lit up with enthusiasm, her eyes sparkling as she spoke of the ways they could bring people together. Helena felt a profound joy watching her daughter reclaim a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. Isabel was no longer the distant, polished figure who had once felt unreachable. She was a woman of compassion, of purpose, and, once again, Helena's little girl. Over the next few weeks, they transformed the house room by room. Together, they painted, rearranged furniture, and added cozy touches that made each space feel inviting and warm. Helena delighted in helping Isabel choose fabrics and colors, suggesting small details that reminded them of their old home, the smell of fresh lavender, hand-sewn cushions, and warm lighting. Every day felt like a new beginning, and with each task, they drew closer, their bond growing richer and stronger. They laughed, they shared stories, and sometimes they worked in silence, both knowing that they were creating something precious. On the day of their first official gathering, the house was filled with the aromas of freshly baked bread and flowers from the garden. Guests from the community arrived with open hearts, and the atmosphere was one of pure warmth and joy. Helena moved through the rooms, welcoming old friends and new faces, each person bringing their own unique energy to the space. Isabel moved with her, their laughter and shared glances a silent testament to the journey they had taken. The house felt alive, filled with the sounds of conversation, music, and the beautiful, ordinary noise of people simply being together. At one point, Isabel stood beside Helena, looking around at the bustling room. "Mother, look at all of this," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "I never imagined this house could feel so full, so alive. It's everything I ever wanted, but didn't know how to find." Helena wrapped an arm around her daughter, her eyes misty with emotion. "We found it together, Isabel. Love, family, it was here all along. We just had to open our hearts to it." As the evening drew to a close, the last guests trickled out, leaving Helena and Isabel alone in the quiet, cozy warmth of their transformed home. They sat together on the sofa, both exhausted yet content, savoring the silence that now felt like a welcome companion rather than an empty void. Helena looked over at Isabel, feeling a deep sense of pride and love. "I'm so proud of us," she whispered. We've turned pain into something beautiful, something that will live on beyond us. Isabel took her mother's hand, her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mother, she whispered back, her voice breaking with emotion. For never giving up on me, for believing in us even when I didn't. You've given me everything. They embraced, holding each other close, their hearts finally at peace. They had walked a long and difficult road, but they had emerged stronger, bound by a love that nothing, not even time, distance, or hurt, could ever break. And as they sat together in the gentle light of their shared home, Helena knew that this was the life she had always dreamed of. She and Isabel had found their way back to each other, and together they had created a new legacy, a home that would welcome others, a place of love, warmth, and healing. They had become a true family again, and nothing could take that away. If you like this story, take the opportunity to see the others that are appearing on your screen right now. Subscribe to the channel and comment on what you thought of this story. See you soon. Bye.